It was supposed to be an ordinary Friday afternoon. Sarah, my best friend since childhood, had invited me over to her house while her parents were out for the evening. Her dad, Andrew, was always working late, leaving Sarah and me to spend our time watching movies, gossiping about school, or simply lounging around. I'd known Andrew for years, but I'd never thought much about him. He was just her quiet, reserved father who rarely engaged with us unless it was necessary. That afternoon, however, everything was different. I arrived at Sarah's house just after school, feeling the usual sense of comfort that came with being at her place. She wasn't home yet, so I went straight to the guest room to change into something more casual. It had become my little sanctuary during our hangouts, a space where I could shed the rigid formality of school clothes and just relax. I was in the process of pulling off my sweater when I heard the front door creak open. No big deal, I thought. Sarah must have come back early. But then, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway, slow and deliberate. I didn't think much of it until the door to the guest room opened with a quiet squeak. I turned around, my heart skipping a beat as I found myself face to face with Andrew, his dark eyes wide in surprise. He had clearly expected to find the room empty. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. I had half a sweater still hanging off my arms, the rest of my clothes half changed. We both froze, caught in the awkwardness of the situation. "Oh my God, I'm sorry," Andrew stammered, his face flushing with a deep shade of crimson. He quickly looked away, stepping back to give me space. "I didn't know you were here." It felt like the room had suddenly become suffocating. I tugged the sweater the rest of the way down over my head, suddenly aware of the silence, the weight of the moment. I barely managed to mumble, "It's fine. No worries." But my voice came out a little breathless. Andrew was still standing in the doorway, as if unsure whether to leave or stay. There was a hesitation in his movements, something unfamiliar about the way he was acting. He glanced at me again, his expression apologetic, before finally muttering, "I'll just let you finish. I'm so sorry again." "Yeah, it's okay," I replied, though my voice sounded more like I was trying to convince myself than him. He didn't say anything else. He simply turned and walked out, leaving the door slightly ajar behind him. I stood there, heart hammering in my chest, staring at the door. It was an accident. Yes. But the tension in the air wasn't accidental at all. There was something else there, something unspoken, lingering between us now. I could feel it. And though I told myself to just brush it off, I knew that moment would change everything. In that brief encounter, I felt a shift I couldn't quite explain. It wasn't just the awkwardness of the situation, it was the sudden awareness of him, Andrew, Sarah's dad, like I was seeing him for the first time in a way I shouldn't be. The world outside the guest room seemed to slip away as the strange, unsettling energy between us settled in, leaving me wondering if things could ever return to normal again. The days following that moment were painfully awkward. Every time I saw Andrew, my stomach twisted with a strange mix of guilt and anticipation. The accidental encounter had ignited something between us, something neither of us could deny, though neither of us dared to speak of it. It was a few days later when Sarah invited me over again. This time, her parents were both home, but Andrew was in his study, working late as usual. I tried to act normal, like nothing had changed, but my nerves were frayed. Every creak of the floorboards, every soft sound from the hallway made my heart race, as though any second, he might appear again, unexpectedly. As the night wore on, Sarah and I were in the living room, scrolling through our phones, laughing about a meme she'd sent me earlier. But I couldn't focus. My mind kept drifting back to that moment. To Andrew's startled expression. To his flustered apologies. To the way his gaze lingered just a little too long before he turned and left the room. The house was quieter now, the usual hum of activity replaced with a heavy silence. I could feel it in the air. Every time I saw him at the corner of my eye, whether he was in the kitchen or passing by the living room, I felt it. The lingering tension. The unspoken awareness that something had shifted between us, even if we both pretended otherwise. And then, that evening, as if drawn by some invisible force, I found myself standing in the kitchen, just a few feet away from him. He was leaning over the counter, scribbling something down on a piece of paper. The quiet hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in the room. I felt an odd pull, something that made it impossible for me to turn away. I stepped forward, almost without thinking. "Hey, Mr. Westbrook," I said, my voice quieter than I intended. He looked up at me, his eyes meeting mine briefly before flicking down to the countertop. "Oh, hey, Lily. Didn't see you there." I couldn't help but notice the way he stiffened slightly, the same discomfort in his posture that had been there since that day. It made me feel both embarrassed and oddly aware. He was trying to act normal, but we both knew it wasn't. Nothing about this was normal anymore. I cleared my throat, trying to steer the conversation away from the unease hanging between us. "How's work been?" I asked, the words feeling awkward as soon as they left my mouth. "Busy," he replied, offering a small, strained smile. "You know how it is." I nodded, unsure how to respond. I watched him for a moment, unable to look away. His brown eyes, usually so guarded, seemed to flicker with something deeper now, something I couldn't quite place. There was a long pause, where neither of us spoke. I could feel the air thickening with unspoken words, and then, for the briefest of moments, our eyes met again. This time, there was a different kind of tension, one that wasn't rooted in guilt or embarrassment, but something much more dangerous. I swallowed hard, my pulse quickening. He shifted uncomfortably, and I wondered if he could feel it too. And then, just as quickly as it had arrived, the moment passed. "I should probably go check on Sarah," I said, my voice shaky. Without waiting for an answer, I turned and walked away, leaving the kitchen, and the strange, unspoken connection between us, behind. But I knew it wasn't over. Something had changed, and I couldn't pretend it hadn't. The tension between Andrew and me grew over the next few days, a silent undercurrent that neither of us acknowledged, but both of us felt. I tried to keep my distance, spending time with Sarah as usual, but every interaction with him seemed to carry an extra layer of discomfort. The accidental encounter, once just an embarrassing moment, had evolved into something far more complicated, something neither of us could ignore. It wasn't until the following weekend that things came to a head. Sarah had gone out with some friends, leaving Andrew and me alone in the house for a few hours. I hadn't expected to be alone with him again so soon, and my nerves were on edge as I lingered in the living room, pretending to read a book. I could hear him in the kitchen, moving about, his footsteps the only sound in the otherwise quiet house. The isolation made everything feel more intense, the space between us charged with something unspoken. I knew he was trying to act normal. He was being polite, asking if I wanted coffee or a snack, but there was an edge to his voice, a tension he couldn't mask no matter how hard he tried. I didn't know if I could pretend anymore, if I could keep acting like everything was fine when I was constantly aware of him, aware of *us. It happened when I least expected it. Andrew appeared in the doorway, his hand resting lightly on the frame. He didn't speak at first, just stood there, watching me with those dark eyes. His expression was unreadable, but I could see the conflict in the way he held himself, tightly, as if he were fighting something. He took a deep breath, then said quietly, "Lily, we need to talk." My heart skipped. I nodded, my palms suddenly clammy. "Yeah, okay." I put the book aside, the calmness of my voice a poor mask for the way my pulse quickened. He stepped into the room, closing the distance between us, though he still seemed to hesitate. "I can't keep pretending this isn't affecting me," he said, his voice low. There was a rawness to it that made my chest tighten. "That moment, when I walked in on you, it was more than just an accident for me. I can't stop thinking about it." I swallowed, my throat dry. This was the moment. I had expected it, dreaded it, but now that it was here, it was even more overwhelming than I imagined. "Andrew, my voice caught, and I had to pause to gather my thoughts. I didn't want it to be like this. I didn't want it to change anything between us." He looked away for a moment, his jaw tightening. "But it has, hasn't it?" he said, his words tinged with regret. "I can't stop thinking about you. And I know it's wrong. I know I shouldn't feel this way, but I do." The room seemed to shrink around me as his confession hit me like a wave. My heart raced, but I couldn't find the words to respond. I hadn't expected him to be so honest, so raw. But I knew, deep down, that I had been feeling the same thing. The same pull, the same complicated, forbidden attraction. "I don't know what to do about it," he continued, his voice quieter now. "But I had to tell you. I couldn't keep pretending." I stood there in stunned silence, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. I wanted to say something, anything, to break the suffocating tension, but all I could do was stare at him, my breath shallow. In that moment, the world outside the room seemed to vanish. There was only Andrew and me, caught in this unspoken web that neither of us could escape. The silence that followed Andrew's confession was deafening. The weight of his words hung in the air like an invisible barrier, thick and unyielding. I felt my chest tighten, my mind racing to catch up with what had just happened. I had known, in the deepest corners of my mind, that things had changed between us, but hearing him admit it out loud felt like the earth shifting beneath me. For a moment, I couldn't speak. My thoughts were tangled, emotions clashing in a whirlwind I couldn't control. I wanted to deny it, to tell him that we were both being ridiculous. But the truth was, I had felt it too. The pull, the forbidden attraction that seemed to grow stronger with every passing day. Andrew took a step closer, his eyes searching mine, as if waiting for me to say something, anything. But I remained silent, unsure of how to respond. The reality of what was happening was still sinking in. This wasn't just some innocent flirtation. It was something deeper, something dangerous. I had to be careful. "I don't expect anything from you," Andrew continued, his voice softer now, almost apologetic. "I just needed you to know. I don't want to make things worse." I looked at him, my heart pounding in my chest. His vulnerability in that moment made the air feel thick with emotion. He wasn't just the father of my best friend. He wasn't just an older man who had a place in my life I never questioned. He was someone who had just made himself vulnerable to me, and I didn't know how to handle it. "I'm not sure what to say either," I finally managed to whisper. This isn't right. I know it isn't. But what? What could I say? That I felt the same. That I was just as drawn to him as he was to me. That even knowing how wrong it was, I could feel the desire building inside me every time we were in the same room. I couldn't say any of that. Not now, not like this. "I don't want to ruin everything," I said instead, my voice barely audible. "I don't want things to get messy between us, Andrew." He nodded slowly, a heavy sigh escaping his lips. "I understand," he said quietly. "Believe me, I do. I never wanted to complicate things. I never wanted to make you feel uncomfortable." I met his gaze, and for a fleeting moment, I saw a flash of regret in his eyes. But there was something else too, something unspoken, a mutual understanding between us. We both knew that things had changed, that we were standing on a precipice, staring down at a future that was uncertain and dangerous. But neither of us could take a step back. Andrew cleared his throat, taking a small step away from me. "I think it's best if we just let things settle for a while," he said, his voice steady but laced with something I couldn't quite place. "I'm not going anywhere, and neither are you. But maybe we just need time." I nodded slowly, unsure if I agreed or if I was simply afraid of what might happen if we didn't take that time. The space between us, the quiet distance, felt like a temporary solution, a way to give us both a chance to breathe before everything became too overwhelming. As I left the room, the heavy silence returned, but this time it was different. The uncertainty between us wasn't gone, but it was something we both knew how to live with, for now. I didn't know where things would go from here, or if they would ever go anywhere at all. But I couldn't help the flicker of hope that surged in my chest, wondering if, somehow, we'd find a way to navigate the tangled web we had woven together. And maybe, just maybe, we'd be okay.